The baby's crying was so loud that I changed the locks. Well, what am I supposed to do then? I asked James. For some reason, I heard my in-laws' voices in response. Both you and the kid can sleep on the streets, followed those unbelievable words. I could also hear my in-laws laughing, so they're in on it too, huh? Realizing that, I said with a sigh, all right, wherever I sleep, don't complain. Huh? Both my in-laws and James were dumbfounded. They probably thought I had nowhere to go, but tough luck for them. I never thought I'd be locked out, but I do have a place to go, and that place happens to be inconvenient for them. Well, they can regret it after I'm gone. I don't care what they say later. Right now, all that matters to me is Barbara. If I can protect her, I don't care if you all go down in flames. With that resolve, I turned my back on my in-laws' house. My name is Mary. Next month, I'll be celebrating my 31st birthday. I'm a stay-at-home mom, but right now, I'm not doing any housework. Of course, I'm not just slacking off. You see, Barbara was born just 3 weeks ago, so I'm currently resting. That's why I'm not doing any chores. However, James doesn't seem to care. Why aren't you doing any housework? Just want to slack off. Even my father-in-law, who was with his wife during childbirth, seems clueless. People usually get back to housework the next day. It's astonishing that he'd say something like that. Doesn't anyone understand me? Things aren't going well with my husband, and there's a distance between me and my in-laws. I don't have my parents anymore, and I have no family to rely on. But even if I'm all alone, I must protect Barbara at all costs. That thought kept me going. Maybe getting married was a mistake. I've been thinking that a lot lately. But until we got married, both James and my in-laws were kind, especially my in-laws. They even offered to cover the wedding costs, which shows how considerate they were towards me. Can we really accept the money for the wedding, Mary? It's her only son's wedding. We can't be stingy, or we'll be the laughing stock of our family. Saying this, my mother-in-law chuckled. My father-in-law felt the same at that time. Both James and I work in the bridal industry. Some of our company colleagues will be attending, so we can't have a wedding that's embarrassing. James and my father-in-law work at the same bridal company, pretty well known in our local area, kind of like a recognized company in Nebraska. Moreover, they have a broad range of businesses. Their primary focus is on wedding venues, but they also manage restaurants for wedding, after parties and such, so most of the attendees were deeply familiar with weddings. Guess that means we couldn't have a cheap-looking wedding. Now I understand why they offered to cover the expenses. So, with the help of my in-laws, James and I had a rather lavish wedding. But the good times ended there. Once we got married and I began living in their home, they started to make demands. Hey, Mary, you're not expecting yet. I gave a vague response. My mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh. Oh boy, you're not too helpful, are you? Excuse me? Not helpful, I quickly retorted, but she just looked away. It's nothing. She brushed it off in an obvious manner. I was like, wait, is this what they call the cold shoulder? The thought briefly crossed my mind, but I still felt indebted because of the wedding expenses. In the end, I couldn't muster the courage to confront her directly. On the other hand, my father-in-law treats me like I'm some sort of maid. Hey, where are the snacks? Sorry, I'll get them right now. You should have had it ready before I got back. Some life you are, he started to grumble. I was surprised. Some wife? What's that supposed to mean? Do I also need to look after him? I married James and became his wife, so I'm committed to him. Of course I want to do my best for my in-laws too, but being ordered around feels a bit different. I wonder if this is how they truly feel about me. I was baffled by the sudden change in my in-laws' attitude. However, I didn't have the guts to stand up to them. I thought if I did, they'd kick me out. I quit my job when we got married. I don't have much savings left, and I don't have my parents, meaning if we were to divorce, I'd have no one to turn to. Out of fear, I couldn't defy my in-laws, even when my mother-in-law picked on me or when my father-in-law treated me like a maid. I had no choice but to endure. I've suppressed my feelings deep inside. Then, about 6 months after our marriage, one day, I felt sick as I was about to prepare breakfast and collapsed on the spot. "What's wrong?" my mother-in-law asked, sounding annoyed. "I just feel a bit dizzy. You're so clumsy." "I'm sorry, just a moment." Saying that, I rushed to the bathroom, but my condition didn't improve. "Hey, what the heck are you doing, Mary? Leaving your chores and doing what?" "Sorry, that's not good enough." "I'm off to work, so make sure you finish the housework." "Got it?" James shouted. I felt too sick to even respond. A few hours passed, and I finally felt better, but my mother-in-law was waiting for me in the living room. "Found a good excuse to slack off, huh?" I didn't mean to slack off. "Don't talk back to me. Just clean and do the laundry." I flinched at her loud voice. She kept glaring at me, unaware of how I felt. "Guess I just gotta do it." With a sigh, I started the chores. I got through that day, but my health didn't fully recover. Feeling something was off a few days later, I went to the doctor. Turns out, I was pregnant. I hurried home to report to my mother-in-law first. To my surprise, she suddenly changed her attitude. "Oh, you were pregnant. Why didn't you say so sooner?" She grinned at me and then quickly started making a call. "It's been a while, you know. My son's wife is pregnant." Judging from the conversation, it seemed she was bragging to a relative. Maybe she'll be a bit kinder to me now. That was the hope I clung to. But I was wrong. Even after learning about my pregnancy, my in-laws treated me the same, even worse. I overheard my father-in-law saying something. "Once the heir is born, we don't need her. We could even let her go." He was happily chatting on the phone with an acquaintance. I was utterly taken aback. All they really wanted was an heir. I kind of knew it from the way they treated me, but hearing it out loud made it all the more painful. I bit my lip and continued with the housework. Of course, I thought about discussing this with James, but right after finding out about my pregnancy, James started coming home late. When I asked him why, James replied with a sharp tone, "You're pregnant, so I've done my part as a husband, haven't I?" "What do you mean? If a wife doesn't get pregnant, folks talk, right?" I just did my part to help with that. And so, James rambled on with his selfish reasoning. "What the heck, James? Stop joking around. Enough. All you need to do is give birth. That's your duty as a wife." James looked at me as if he married me out of obligation. At that moment, everything became clear. James wasn't going to support me. In fact, he wasn't even on my side. I was all alone here. Besides, my in-laws were never kind to me. They were just kind to ensure their heir and to have someone do the housework. Realizing that, my spirit broke. All my love and feelings for James vanished. Oh, yes. I'm going to divorce him once the baby is born. From that day on, that's what I started thinking. In that case, I need to be prepared for the divorce. In the short time before giving birth, I hired someone to investigate James and my in-laws. And soon, the day came for me to give birth. A beautiful baby girl was born, and I named her Barbara. The day we brought Barbara home, both my in-laws and James were thrilled. However, their expressions gradually darkened, and then tragedy struck. It was on the day of Barbara's 1-month checkup. After the checkup, I was given a ride by Mr. Nicholas, the CEO of James' company. Apparently, Mr. Nicholas' daughter had given birth around the same time I had, so we ended up having our checkups together, and I got a ride due to Mr. Nicholas' kindness. But there was a problem when we got to my house. For some reason, the front door key wouldn't work. I knocked at the door and called out, "Hey, James, I can't open the door." From inside, I heard James' voice. The baby kept crying at night, so I changed the lock. "You changed the front door lock without telling me." When I asked him that, James raised his voice. "She cries all day. I want to enjoy some quiet time, so don't come back." So what am I supposed to do? When I asked James, surprisingly, I heard my in-laws respond, "You and the kid can sleep on the streets." Following that unbelievable statement, I could hear my in-laws laughing. "So they're in on this too, huh?" Realizing that, I responded sarcastically, "Fine, don't complain wherever I end up sleeping." Both my in-laws and James sounded shocked. They probably thought I had nowhere to go, but joke's on them. I didn't expect to be locked out, but I have somewhere to go, and that place will be inconvenient for all of you. They'll regret it later, and I won't care about what they say. Right now, the only thing that matters to me is Barbara. If I can protect her, I don't care if you all go down. I made up my mind and turned my back on my in-laws. I then approached Mr. Nicholas. You heard everything, right?" "Of course I did." "So about what we discussed earlier, could you help me?" I asked Mr. Nicholas. By the way, that conversation was about something Mr. Nicholas had mentioned during the ride. Actually, there are several postnatal care hotels. Mr. Nicholas's company, which is into the bridal business, was also considering incorporating this postnatal care from marriage to childbirth to raising kids. Mr. Nicholas often talks about wanting long-term relationships with our customers, and he asked if I would be interested in being a consumer monitor for their plan. I asked a question, and Mr. Nicholas agreed. He then offered to guide me through it, and I thanked him. However, I couldn't stand the attitude of James's in-laws. Mr. Nicholas looked sternly at them, probably thinking about some form of retribution for James and the other two. As a company CEO, it's hard to ignore such things, especially when the company is entering the children's business. With that thought, I proposed an idea to Mr. Nicholas. Upon hearing the plan I had thought of even before giving birth, Mr. Nicholas nodded deeply. We decided to collaborate on that proposal, and I gained a powerful ally. However, I was dead tired, so they had me transported straight to a postnatal care facility, kind of like a luxury facility. Thanks to Mr. Nicholas' influence, I got to stay in a premium suite. The postnatal care plan experience was top-notch, with specialized staff like midwives available 24/7, comprehensive support, and many relaxation amenities. There were other new moms around, and for the first time in a while, I could really take it easy. I wish I could stay here forever. That feeling just came out of my mouth. I could really rest, and then the next day, Mr. Nicholas came to visit me. In front of me, he called James, and James answered, "Is that you, James? Sorry to disturb you during your break." "No worries. What can I do for you?" "Well, actually, I have a favor to ask. I'd like you guys to be models for our brochure." "Can you do it?" "You mean my wife, daughter, and I? Look, your daughter was just born, right? She'd be perfect for the brochure." True, for a bridal-related brochure, they'd be the ideal choice. But James had just kicked me out. There's no way he'd agree under these circumstances, right? I couldn't help but smirk. If James refused a direct request from the president himself, there's no way it wouldn't impact his career advancement. That was my plan to damage James, but James immediately accepted without hesitation. "Sure thing. I got this." I was flustered. Now I can't damage James. My plan was a total bust. When I thought that, Mr. Nicholas smirked. Then Mr. Nicholas said to James, "Can you come to the studio right away? How about in an hour?" "Wait, in an hour?" "Yeah, I'll get the crew ready." As Mr. Nicholas was speaking, James interrupted in a panic. "Hold on a sec. What's the matter?" "Well, I have to discuss with my wife." James began to fumble for words. It seems he thought he could convince me if he had more time. That's what you get for agreeing without thinking. Serves him right. I couldn't help but grin. "Why don't you talk to her now? Your daughter was just born. She's right there with you, isn't she?" Mr. Nicholas added salt to the wound. James was completely silent. In the end, James said he'd consult and hung up the phone. Needless to say, I was bombarded with calls right after. Of course, I ignored them all. For about 30 minutes, my cell phone was ringing off the hook. But it seems he finally gave up and my phone went silent. Immediately after, Mr. Nicholas's phone rang. "Well, my wife says she's embarrassed." I never said any such thing, as I thought that. Mr. Nicholas let out a very audible sigh. "Really can't even persuade your own wife?" "No, it's not like that. I'm really disappointed in you." As soon as Mr. Nicholas said that, a loud apology started loud enough for me to hear. "I'm so sorry. I promise I'll persuade her." The voice of his apology sounded like James was making desperate efforts to convince me in front. After letting James apologize for a while, Mr. Nicholas ended the call. Then he dialed up my father-in-law. "Hello, Mr. Nicholas. What can I do for you?" "Actually, I have a gift for you. Would you accept it?" Saying so, Mr. Nicholas looked at me. I smiled and nodded. "Do you know that we run a restaurant for parties?" "Of course. I'm thinking of lending it to you." "Wait, lend it out." My father-in-law must have been puzzled. The truth is, this was all part of my plan. First, Mr. Nicholas would personally offer the spacious restaurant for James's father and then have a party for the grandchild there. Once the 1-month checkup is done, it's about time for the baby to go out for walks. That's the time for a party to show our baby around. Then any regular family might jump at this offer with joy, but our situation is different. James just kicked me out, so there's no way I'd accept his invitation. My father-in-law began to panic and make excuses. "No, it's just, what? Are you gonna decline my gift?" "No, I'd never." "It's just that we have to consider Mary and the baby's health." My father-in-law started making up reasons. I was irritated. Then Mr. Nicholas interjected. "Was there a problem at the 1-month checkup?" "No, it's not like that, but—" "Then have a party there. Don't worry about the costs. I'll cover it. As for the date—" Mr. Nicholas kept moving the conversation forward. All the while, I could hear my father-in-law's flustered voice. "He's panicking. Wonder what he's gonna do." I was holding back my laughter. Eventually, Mr. Nicholas finished talking and abruptly hung up. Right then, my phone started ringing. It's from my father-in-law. Grinning, I held my phone. Well, what should I do? No need to even ask about my father-in-law's business. So I could just ignore it, but ignoring isn't fun, and I'd be left feeling frustrated. So I picked up, "Hello, Mary." His voice was louder than usual. He must be really panicked. Either way, I responded with an annoyed tone. "Oh, is that you? Thank God. Mary, please listen to me." No thanks," I replied sharply. My father-in-law looked stunned for a moment but quickly gathered himself, pleading with me. "Don't say that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime request, please." At that point, I felt like I had the upper hand. Trying to hide my amusement, I asked, "What's going on?" "Well, I have a favor to ask." He began to relay what Mr. Nicholas had told him. However, it all seemed too convenient to me. He didn't mention any instructions from Mr. Nicholas, nor did he specify a date and time. He just kept going on about wanting to have a party and how he'd rent out a place, so I bluntly refused. I decline. After all, I was kicked out. No, that's not it. The thing is, my father-in-law started to rattle off excuses. Losing my patience, I raised my voice. If you send me a video where you apologize to me, I'll consider attending that party. Well, he was at a loss for words. Send me that video. If it checks out, I'll go. Bye. With that, I hung up the phone. He surely wouldn't take himself to go as far as apologizing to me. I was too confident about that. However, contrary to what I thought, a video of my father-in-law begging was sent to my cell phone. This threw a wrench into my plans. I was going to make the party a flop and have him apologize to Mr. Nicholas. I'd have to come up with something else. Seeing my troubled face, Mr. Nicholas sitting next to me offered some advice. How about this for the debut party? I listened intently. It was indeed an intriguing idea. Moreover, I could get one over on both James and my in-laws. I'll go with that. I immediately started getting ready. A few days went by, and the day of the party Mr. Nicholas had set came around. Of course, I hadn't been back to my in-laws' place. In fact, I hadn't even been in touch with James or my in-laws. A little suspense never hurt anyone, right? Thinking that, I headed to the venue with Mr. Nicholas. Peeking into the venue, I could see my in-laws being grilled by relatives. What's going on? Why aren't they here? Something's not right. My father-in-law was sweating bullets. Some other relatives were confronting James. You didn't leave the house with your wife. No, there's no way we could leave together. After all, we weren't living together. Still, I felt bad for keeping everyone waiting. Slowly, Mr. Nicholas and I entered the venue. Thank you for waiting. Finally, my father-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. James, on the other hand, rushed up to me. What have you been up to, Mary? Excuse me, preparing for this event, duh. Preparations? But where's Barbara? James quickly looked around in a panic. Even though he had been neglecting her all this time, I replied with a sigh, I've left Barbara with a babysitter today. What? Then what about the party? I prepared a slideshow. That's enough, isn't it? Saying that, I brushed past James. Then I began explaining to the gathered relatives. I couldn't bring Barbara here, but I've prepared a slideshow for you all. While I spoke, a staff member began setting up the slideshow, checking that I continued my speech. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, but please enjoy this. With my signal, soft music began to play, and the venue dimmed. Several photos were projected onto the screen, and immediately gasps echoed throughout the room. What's this? Displayed on the screen were photos of James's affair, followed by photos of my father-in-law's affair. You've got to be kidding me. You're the worst. Naturally, seeing the photos, James and his father went pale, but quickly, James dashed to stop the slideshow. Stop it. Turn it off. Really? You brought this on yourself, didn't you? This is your doing. Why would you do such a thing? James shouted at me. So, I shot back, it's because you locked Barbara and me out. You changed the front door locks while we weren't home. The room went silent, and then murmurs began. Locked out. What's going on? Amidst the whispers, I exposed the conversation from when our house keys were changed. I also mentioned that Mr. Nicholas was there. That's a lie, right? Sorry, but it's true. Mr. Nicholas witnessed it and helped me out. As I said that, Mr. Nicholas nodded. It's over. This is the end for me. James crumbled, and looking back, his father was in total shock. Going forward, Our company is going to expand into the children's business, so we don't need employees who can't care for children. It wasn't my fault. I was just sleep deprived. No excuses. Resign on your own. If not, I'm ready to fire you, even if it causes a scene. The determination of the president was intense. In the end, James and his father resigned immediately. After that, I asked James for a divorce, and having those revealing photos of his affair made the divorce process smooth. Additionally, James settled by paying me child support for Barbara. He just got cash from his leave, so he wouldn't struggle for money right now. Interestingly, his mistress claimed she didn't know James was already married, and she's now seeking compensation from him. Looks like they're going to have quite a dispute, but it's none of my business. By the way, my in-laws seem to be sticking together. They actually want to divorce, but all their savings went to James's legal fees. To support their immediate living expenses, they're selling their family home and moving into an apartment. Considering they also have to pay child support, they'll need to tighten their belts and live frugally. On my end, I was approached by Mr. Nicholas regarding a job offer. He said, "We've got someone leaving soon. How about working for us? Barbara's still young, but I need to work to make ends meet. So I'm thinking I'll take up Mr. Nicholas' job offer in a little while. For now, I just want to quietly spend precious moments with Barbara. After all the hardships I faced, I think I deserve that little luxury."